I would like to ask you please to go into your Old Testaments to the book of Genesis as we continue our discussion on marriage and 6 critical keys to building a strong home. We need to spend a little bit of time tonight in the beginning, in Genesis, where God first formed this special relationship. Genesis chapter 2, please. Just a brief reminder of what we've set out to do. We have 3 lessons devoted to a simple study of building better home lives and marriages. And as I said this morning, and I hope has already been understood, this is not just for people who are in marriages. We have a lot of young people in this church who are not yet married. We have people who are engaged and soon to be married. We certainly have those that we would love to see enter into this covenant with hope and enjoy success from the earliest stages. But preparation is the key to that. So we hope it's helpful for them. Certainly all of us who are in marriage, we're prayerful that God can make what is good even better. And even those who are no longer in marriage or maybe have never been, God will put people in your life who need to hear some things. And He may position you to share with them things to help them. And I'm prayerful that this will be something that you can use in that regard. So as you can see, 3 lessons. We're looking at 6 big things. I think everything I've ever preached on marriage or done in sessions or classes can be summed up into these simple categories. So brief recall of this morning. We began with the concept of the mirror. When I say that you don't have to be married to follow along in this study, I really mean it. This is a single person's connection with Christ. Whether you're married or single or whatever relationship there is in your life, there ought to be time designated by you to take an honest look at who you are. You may want to ask others to help you with that. Sometimes that's a very scary thing to do, to ask honestly what you sound like or what you're doing. But we must consider 3 very basic things, and that is, what is my relationship in terms of faithfulness to God? Do I take responsibility? Do I take responsibility for how my conduct affects and changes the people around me? And when I make a mistake, what do I do next? Something tells me that can help in just about every connection that we might have. So we started off with some basic self-evaluation, and then we delved into the idea of 3 persons involved in every marriage, God who made it. We'll see that in Genesis 20 or Genesis 2 in verse 20 in a moment. But also this concept of life will always get in the way if you let it. And you can have a 2-dimensional marriage if you want, where you're here and they are there and there's stuff in the middle, but God is that 3rd dimension. And when you pull towards Him, you can find each other there, you can find comfort there. And we just gave some very basic ideas on how we might do that. So thankful tonight. So many have come. You've taken this seriously. You've purposefully decided to worship tonight. And I'm glad that you did. I hope you feel fulfilled in that. So let's continue a little bit tonight with 2 more on the list. We'll be looking over here at the strategy and the secret. So let's begin with the first, the strategy. I don't know what you think of when you hear that term, but I think of battle, of war. There are adversaries opposing one another. There will be a winner and there will be a loser. Whoever has the best strategy, whoever formulates the best plan will win over the other. And maybe as I start saying that, you might think about how that can happen in marriage. How he's on one side, she's on the other. They're battling against each other. This often comes with troops. Have you noticed that? When a husband is on one side of a battle line and a wife is on the other side of the battle line, he will line up his buddies who support all of his arguments. There's a lot of jest and sarcasm there with some teeth to it. She might go and find, I don't know, maybe her mom. It's my mother-in-law. My mother-in-law is here tonight, and I totally love her. But what you find is when you're battling another side, you want support. And so you tend to find that when a marriage is at odds and there's some differences, they tend to rally up that kind of support. And that is so incredibly detrimental to healing and to a future together. And so the real strategy is the opposite of all of that. It is something that I believe we all profess to when we first got married. You know, when the 2 circles were right there beside each other, and it's simply this. No matter what, no matter who, the only exception, as we'll mention in a moment, is God. We must never battle against God. And God must always be on our side with us. But with that one exception stated, it will always be my wife and I against the world. We don't want to battle you guys. I don't want to fight with you, Jonathan. We don't want to battle with anybody. But if there's a battle that's going to happen, if we're fighting for something, if anything has a throwdown associated with it, she will be on my side and I will be on hers. And if we have to take on everybody we know, that's what we will do. We will do it together. It will always be the two of us. We can rally other troops, which is what I'm looking at now. I'm looking at troops, friends, fellow soldiers. But a designation has to be made early that if we have a disagreement or a problem, we will not rally troops against each other. We will always do this together. We will always do this together. When you have a family and kids, be careful, because if husband and wife are against one another, sometimes children choose sides. Now we got a big mess, don't we? And this is why I think it's wise that if a couple with children is having a disagreement between them, that their children shouldn't see those disagreements air out. Those children should witness parents who are on the same side, who take the same position. They don't know what goes on behind closed doors. It's kind of like with our eldership. I mention this a lot. Sometimes there's some blood on the walls back there so that we can have peace out there. I don't know what happened in that elders room, but I know when they came out, it was them against the world, and I had a lot of confidence in that. That's the way it ought to be in our marriages at all costs. Let me show you this in Genesis chapter 2. In Genesis chapter 2, I just want you to enjoy the language of what a marriage really is and what happens when we join into it. In Genesis chapter 2 and verse 20, God made Adam and all these animals and things, and there was no helper suitable for him in verse 20. And so it says in verse 21, so the Lord God caused a deep sleep to fall upon the man, and he slept. Then he took one of his ribs and closed up the flesh at that place. Genesis 2 and 22. The Lord fashioned into a woman the rib which he had taken from the man and brought her to the man. The man said, this is now bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. She shall be called woman because she was taken out of a man. For this reason, a man shall leave his father and his mother. And you could also add that a woman will leave her father and mother. And they shall be joined to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. And the man and his wife, of course, were both naked and not ashamed in the garden. I'm going to use my hands for this, first time in a while. But you know, it starts out with a husband and wife who become a mom and dad. And let's say they have a daughter and maybe several kids. In your family with your kids, it's really important that you stay together, that you don't let people in the world get between you, that you don't let their friends at school turn them against you. Like as soon as that starts happening and the battle lines for what we're fighting for are between us, it completely falls apart. We got to keep our families together, and you got to watch your kids and make sure you're all fighting for the same thing. Well, here's a man and a woman who have a daughter, and they stay connected. And then here's another man and a woman, and they have a son. And what happens in marriage is we allow that child to come away from that union and enter into a new one. And the rules are exactly the same. The two are one. We are united. And whatever division there is, it can never be allowed to be here. This is where the devil works. And we don't allow that. The language that's used is the two become one flesh. I used to talk a lot about Play-Doh. You know, it's a little sad. There's not as much Play-Doh in our house as there used to be. But you know, we would have the blue Play-Doh and the pink Play-Doh. Anybody have the blue and the pink? What happens when you touch the two together? No big deal. You got blue and pink, pull it right back apart. Put it together, put it right back apart. When you put it in the hands of a 5-year-old for about 16 seconds, what happens to the blue and the pink? It begins to mix together and it becomes blue or blink, I don't know, whatever you want. But it has this new color. Now, once it has become this new mixed thing, what are your odds of even pulling it apart again and separating the two colors? They can no longer be separated. They have become one new thing. Now, you might be saying, you know, in my marriage, that's not how we're behaving. And we pick sides a lot and we battle against one another. What I'm saying is no other tip you hear this week is going to do that any good until you decide that your oneness is something you're going to take seriously. And if there's a battle that's going to happen, the first thing you'll do is make sure you're standing on the same side. And we may have to back up to bigger issues, not little zoomed in issues, but bigger issues about our faith and about our love for God. Let me show this to you as we move forward. A couple of things you'll see here. We already examined Genesis 2. Let me take you to Jesus' language in Matthew 19. In some ways, it's super similar. Jesus is drawing from Genesis when he's asked about marriage and divorce. And the Pharisees come testing him in Matthew 19:3, and they're asking, is it lawful for a man to divorce his wife for any reason at all? Now, you ought to be thinking about that answer in quite clear terms. If two people separated from their families and have become one flesh, they become one, emotionally, spiritually, they're one new collection, then of course there shouldn't be any reason they should ever divorce, and it's never a clean break. He answered and says, well, let's think about this. Have you not read that he created them from the beginning, male and female? For this reason, a man shall leave his father and his mother and be joined to his wife, and the two become one flesh. They are no longer two, but one flesh. What therefore God has joined together, that's marriage, but it really just means unity. Let no man separate. Let no man separate. No villain, no battle, no community, nothing should be allowed to separate those things. Now, what you know about this text, and I'll just add something, is in Matthew 19:9, he says there is one reason of everything in this world. There is one reason I would allow the two to come separate again, and only he can divide those colors. Only, this makes sense, doesn't it? If the two who are married, which shall not be separated, it's us against the world, shall not be separated, only if they separated and they were joined to another person. You see what just happened? We just brought another person and we put physically, sexually in this text, put that person between the two of us and ripped it asunder through bringing someone else in. What I'm here to tell you is, you already know that about divorce and adultery. Do you understand that it applies to every aspect of your marriage? Not just the physical stuff. The way you handle differences, the way you handle life stuff, the way you handle basic challenges, the way you handle the later years and the deterioration of health and all of the like. If we continually separate and let other people in, and we use that against each other, we've lost it. Us against the world. Now, Ephesians 5, please. I should say that while this concept is important and very powerful, it is also quite dangerous. Maybe you've been thinking about that as you've seen this slogan, us against the world. What if us is against God? What if the us is against the church? What if we decide, I'll never let the church between us? The church doesn't want to come between you. The church wants to see you united with God. So we need to reevaluate the way we assess those terminologies. But let me tell you about what happened in the case of a couple not too many years ago. I performed a wedding maybe 5-10 years ago. Two people who were raised in Christian homes. They left their parents' connection and they were joined together as one, and they're very much in love. They're still very much in love 5-10 years later. And they decided they would never argue about anything, and they would always support each other, and they would never let anyone cause them to turn on one another. Well, that's great. I love all of that. Until one day, the knuckle-headed husband decided, I don't think I want to believe in God anymore. And his wife said, well, I don't like to fight you on things, so I don't guess I'll believe in God anymore either. And so then the church comes and says, hey, you really need to believe in God. Look, it's us against the world, We're going to stand together on this in our unbelief. And they disowned their parents, they disowned the church and everybody else. Well, that just shows how powerful it is when used incorrectly. And that's why I took you to Ephesians 5. I just want you to understand that this us against the world thing is powerful, but none of this would even exist if it wasn't for God. God is the one who made marriage and brought us together and made the relationship between us lawful. And the love that we have for each other, the unity, the never letting fighting push us apart, it's connected to Christ in its very beginning stages. In Ephesians 5:22, wives, be subject to your own husbands as to the Lord. Verse 25, husbands, love your wives, just as Christ also loved the church and gave himself up for her. I could read more, but it puts some barriers on this thing, doesn't it? It says, I will submit to you. You are my husband. I will follow you. I will never go rally up troops against you. But we must honor Jesus. And that is a non-negotiable in our lives. And it's the same with the husband. I will love you and support you and help you, but only to the degree that Christ will love what we're doing. And so you're really back to the triangle, aren't you? When I say us against the world, it sounds like I'm talking about two people. I got a cute little picture and they're holding hands. But it's always three, isn't it? The us against whoever has to come against us is myself and my spouse and my Creator. And those three must always be together. And do you think that can be separated? I think not. Let me show you that really quickly. Go back to Ecclesiastes, and we'll look at two of these passages. I like Ecclesiastes chapter 9 because it just talks optimistically about how great marriage can be when we're not battling each other, when we refuse to pick opposite sides. I'll talk about this next Sunday night, but I give you the illustration of zipping the jacket. You might be saying, how do we get back together? We fight about everything. Zoom out, find the things you can agree on and start agreeing on them. That's how you do that. And then you start working, zooming in, agreement after agreement after agreement, and you start to see that, hey, we don't have to fight about everything because it turns out we agree on most things. You know, I'm going to get off base here if I don't stop talking about it, but we see this in the church sometimes too. Like we argue about the few things we disagree with instead of working from a perspective of all the things we do agree on. I think we all could learn from that. In Ecclesiastes, the 9th chapter in verse 7, I just really like this language, this recommendation for life. Go eat your bread in happiness, drink your wine with a cheerful heart, for God has already approved your works. Let your clothes be white all the time, and let not oil be lacking on your head. Enjoy life with the woman whom you love all the days of your fleeting life, which he has given to you under the sun. For this is your reward in life, and in your toil in which you have labored under the sun. I've got my friends that are significantly different than me who are my battle friends. Anybody have battle friends? Battle friends are the friends that I know I'm going to argue with. There's no question. They're going to take the opposite side of whatever I take, but they're friends because I kind of need that. And usually we'll banter and we'll fight about it and we'll come out with some resolution. We're not any closer, but we both learned something maybe. I don't need a marriage like that. That's not the marriage that I want. I want a marriage that's filled with unity and happiness and togetherness and standing as one. And that's just a verse I wanted you to see because that's God's will for us in this fleeting life. I really enjoyed this morning. I think the highlight of the day for me was after the two services this morning, talking to people as they came up and gave me their number. Did you give me your number today? We've been married 60 years. We've been married 62 years. There was a 70. And last week I heard them as well, and there's just this smile on their faces. I got Charlie and Anna stand out to me. And the years, and when he told me how many years, he reached over and he just held her hand, and I saw smiling eyes behind that mask, Miss Anna. And I thought, yes. That's what they've been through a lot. How many of you know they've been through a lot? Let me tell you how they got through it. Any guesses? Together, not against one another. Ecclesiastes, and then we'll move on. Ecclesiastes chapter 4, let's just read verse 9. General principle, Ecclesiastes 4:9. I just want you to think about it in terms of marriage here as we move on to our last thing momentarily. Ecclesiastes chapter 4, verse 9. 2 are better than one because they have a good return for their labor. For if either of them falls, the one will lift up his companion. Now that's a good companion there. But woe to the one who falls down when there is not another one to lift him up. Or you might add, if the other one pushed him over, that would be a little bit even worse. Furthermore, if two lie down together, they keep warm. But who can be warm alone? And if one can overpower him who is alone, there's your adversarial spirit. One can overpower him. But if there are two of us, we can resist him. And then I really like this too. You say, well, you've lost your marriage illustration with this last line. I have not. A cord of 3 strands is not quickly torn apart. Me, my bride, and our Creator. Who can battle that? There's a strength in that. There's a danger in it because of how strong it is, but for the most part, with God at the helm, it can be a wonderful thing. So the strategy is us against the world. Now, you might be saying, I would love more of that. I want more of that. That sounds terrific. How do I get it? And now I get to spend a few minutes. You guys already know this. If you spend any time with me talking about marriage in any conversation, you already know the secret. I think in class a few years ago, we just called it the thing, but I've rebranded it the secret. Probably shouldn't be called a secret. It's one of the most obvious things you could possibly put up on the board. And yet it seems like the longer people are married through the middle ages of raising family, the more obscure this becomes. It's like it's a eureka moment. When we were dating, we knew exactly what it was. What am I talking about? If you want to see any of what we've talked about today happen, then you and your bride or your husband must spend time together in what we call quality time. Anybody heard that phrase before? Quality time. I ask about this kind of early now in counseling. All counseling's private, and I wouldn't tell you anything that happens behind those doors from the other side of the table, but I'll tell you a little bit about my perspective on it. People come and we meet and we talk and we sit together, and at some point in the first time together, I will ask, would you please just take a couple of minutes, you two, and tell me about your quality time together? How many of you know what usually happens next? Just stare at me blankly. You're doing great. You guys are doing great. That's about what happens. There's a lot of, now what do you want me to tell you about again? I want you to tell me about the time you set aside just to be together because you love each other. More. Like when you were dating. Oh yeah. We used to walk, and then they start going to these stories. We used to walk together. We'd walk around the pond behind our house, and we'd hold hands, and we'd sit there for hours, and we'd just be together. We just want to just hold hands, go on long car rides. Yes. Tell me where that has gone. And for the most part, in marriages that are struggling, it has in fact gone. How are we going to fix some of these battles if we don't have quality time? You say, we spend a lot of time together. We sleep in the same bed. We eat in the same house. We live in the same house. Time together and quality time are not the same thing. Time together means two people are in a room together. Quality time is sharing an experience that's to the betterment of you both, and honestly has been intentionally set aside for that purpose. So here's what I usually do in the first or second class of those counseling sessions. I say, okay, your assignment this week could not be more simple. They usually have a little Bible verse questionnaire they work on at home, but I say, okay, it's really simple. By the time you come back a week from tonight, all I want you to do is set aside 2 quality time moments. I want you, sir, to designate a time and you schedule it. It can be totally free. It's not about money, but you make sure that you orchestrate some time. And then to the bride, I want you to also orchestrate some time and just go spend some time together. And all you have to do next week is sit down and just tell me about it. I just want to listen. Sounds simple enough. I can't tell you the exact numbers. I don't keep all the statistics. I keep a few things, but not all of them. But I can say with some level of confidence that at least 50% of the time, and I think I'm being fairly conservative, that we have a study the next week, at least half the time, they either could not or would not get that done. I'm talking about 2 20-minute walks. I'm talking about a half an hour with the television off. I'm talking about sitting there having dinner together, working through a few questions. Couldn't do it. It's like this obscure secret that nobody knows about anymore. I guarantee you. By the way, this works with all kinds of relationships. Quality time is key. Now you might say, could you help me out on quality time? I'd like a little bit more description on what it might be like. I'd love to do that for a few moments. I want to talk to you a bit about love. Marriage is this beautiful relationship. It's unique to every other relationship on the face of the earth, where you are allowed to enjoy all 3 forms of love with one person, and it completely please God. There are 3, did you know this? There are 3 different types or categories of love in the Bible. And by the way, it has nothing to do with Greek language. There's no phileo, agape, none of that stuff. I think that's all interchangeable stuff. It's all Greek to me. But in English, there are 3. Do you know what they are? 3 unique types of love. Here's what I want to do for the next few minutes. I want to show you the 3 different types, which you will instantly recognize if you haven't already. But I'm going to pause with each one and ask you about quality time related to it. Let's just go to Ephesians 5 to start. We can pick almost anywhere for this. The first kind of love that the Bible discusses is by no means limited to marriage. We call it caring love. It's just caring about the well-being of another person. This is the kind of love that Jesus says that he has for all men, whether they're faithful or not. This is the kind of love that we're called in the Sermon on the Mount to have with even our enemies. Even if someone treats us horrendously, we still have a care for their souls. It's the most generic form and base form of all love, and all other love is built upon it. Ephesians 5, I took you back to because it was just really easy to connect it to marriage. Husbands, love your wives just as Christ loved the church. There's nothing physical about that. There's nothing romantic about that. It's just caring about that person and their needs. That's it. Verse 28 words it in a way that maybe guys like me can understand. So husbands ought also to love their wives. What do you mean caring love for my wife? I mean, like you care for yourself. The care that a person has for themselves is just taking care of their own needs. If I have a need, I fill it. If I'm hungry, I eat. If I have something that I want, it's lawful to have, I go and I get it. I take care of myself. Well, he said, that's what I'm talking about. I want you to give that same care, need fulfillment love to an enemy, to a friend, to a stranger, and to your spouse. And sometimes couples are better at this with total strangers. They'll pull the car over on the highway and absolutely go to the fullest extent of charity to help someone they don't know, that they would find a very difficult time with any type of pleasure doing the same thing for their own mate. Instead, we pick apart why they got themselves into that predicament, why they didn't listen to what I told them last week, and all of those kinds of things. Caring love. So let me tell you this. You say, what's quality time? In its broadest form, it's the two people who are married setting aside time from kids, setting aside time from the world, from the television, from inputs and output responsibilities, and just sharing in caring, need-filling love for one another. It's sitting down and having a conversation where you ask more questions than you make statements. It's listening, it's learning, it's loving, it's just saying, what are your needs? It could be something simple, could be, cleaning something at the house or washing the dishes or this or that, but it's just showing care. When you do it together and you're taking care of each other's needs, what a wonderful feeling that is. So first kind of quality time is, hey, what do they need? I think I'll go and I'll do that with them. Can we set aside once a week for that in our marriages? Once a week? Here's a second one. There's another type of love that zeroes in a little tighter. Do you remember the story of Jacob and Rachel and Leah from Genesis 28 and 29? What a disaster that was. What a mess. He falls in love, Jacob does, in Genesis chapter 29. There's no mess here. He's working for Laban and he falls in love with Rachel. And it says that he loves her. And I'm going to guarantee you right now, it's not just that love at the top of the page. He doesn't just say, hey, there's a human being that I can show care for. Oh, no. He looks at her and he has to work 7 years for her. And in verse 18, it said, Jacob loved Rachel. And he said, I will serve you 7 years for your younger daughter, Rachel. And it goes on to say, verse 20, it was like a few days, that fluttery stuff, It was but a few days. 7 years flew by because every night after work, they would just go sit under a tree and hold hands or talk about their future together or do the googly eyes or whatever. There was a special, we call this romantic love. It's not physical. They did not have a physical relationship before they were married. I'm not talking about that. It is a special dating type romantic. You are the most beautiful person that I know. You are the most handsome person that is in my life. You are special. You are unique. You're the only one. And that's what's so weird about this story. She was his only one. And then Laban tricks him and puts him with another. And I don't know how all that ceremony went or how dark it was, but I know that he wakes up the next day and he has consummated a covenant with Leah, her sister. How strange is that? Never worked, by the way, biblically. Not a single time did it ever work. But here's what's interesting to me. Let me ask you a question. Did Jacob love Leah? Yes or no? I think so. I think we're going to talk about physical love in a moment. I think Jacob cared about Leah. You think that's true? He took care of her. He gave her food to eat, and he put a house, a roof over her head, and kind of took care of all of her needs, so he cared about her. And the physical part was there because they had children. I mean, we know they had a physical relationship because she bore children and God opened her womb. And yet in verse 31, the Lord saw that Leah was what? Unloved. You say, no, she wasn't unloved. Number one, he took care of her. Number three, they were in a bed together. What do you mean she's unloved? And I think there are marriages that have missed this too. What do you mean I don't love my wife? She's got a roof over her head. She's got food on the table. Most of the stuff she wants, she gets. We have a physical relationship. Maybe it's not what it used to be, but we do have a physical relationship. Those needs seem to be met. What do you mean? I mean, verse 18 and 20. Romantic, special, uniqueness, beautiful, 1 in a million love. Marriages still need that. So what are we talking about when we're saying quality time? We're talking about a man and his wife setting aside time to go and just express the specialness of that relationship, the uniqueness. There may be romantic gestures, and everybody's romantic gestures are different, but you should know what you can do for your spouse that makes them feel like they're the only person in the world. Sometimes it's M&Ms and Diet Coke at our house, but most of the time we need to go and be together. We just need to be together. I mean, how can I tell you you're the only one I care about and you're the only one I want to be with, and then we just go be with other people all the time? And I'm including children in that. How can I be romantic in that way? When I'm talking about quality time, I'm saying set aside time. Summer and I have been working on this really, really hard. We started, her birthday's in July and mine's in December. So we decided that at least twice a year we would just get away. We couldn't go far at first. We could get like one night in Dallas. One night, not the most, there will be no movies called One Night in Dallas. But it was the beginning of something. It was the beginning of knowing that every 6 months, I mean, we do some romantic things along the way, but this is just going to be us, and it's just going to be us together. We're going to hold hands like we used to, and all those kinds of things. And then we stretched it because Nana's here and so very helpful, and Mama and Papa too, we're able to stretch that into 2 or 3 nights. I don't think I'd trade that in for almost anything in the world. My relationship with God would be more precious than that, and I don't think anything else would be. But we had to build it because quality time gets squeezed out by even great things like kids and work. And then lastly here, 1 Corinthians 7, we'll just talk about this a moment. There are 3 kinds of love. The first 2 you can experience with someone who is not your spouse. The first one you experience hopefully with everyone that you know, you care about them. The second one you start zeroing in on at least one at a time, young men and women. Let me advise you of that, romantic love one at a time. But then you finally decide to marry one of them, and physical love becomes a part of your relationship. The Bible has quite a bit to say about that. 1 Corinthians chapter 7, verse 1. Now concerning the things about which you wrote, it is good for a man not to touch a woman, but because of immoralities, each man is to have his own wife, each woman is to have her own husband. The husband must fulfill his duty to his wife, and likewise also, verse 3, the wife to her husband. The wife does not have authority over her own body, but the husband does. Think 2 are now 1, shared. And likewise also the husband does not have authority over his own body, but the wife does. Stop depriving one another. I mean, that's like really clear language. I understand there can be age limitations, there can be health limitations, but by and large, when we get with couples who are not limited by health or age, and we start digging into some of what's not there in their marriage, and we get to love number 3, and I only do this when Summer and I are together with the 2 of them, we start to find out that there is some real depriving of one another going on in this department. If you are not being together physically when you both have the capability to be together physically, there's only one good reason for that, verse 5, when you are doing something of necessity that is pleasing to God. Like setting aside that time for agreement so that you can devote yourselves to prayer. Maybe you need to go off for work or something, or you have some service responsibility and you have to put that on pause for a little while. Those are things that honor God. He's the only other person in my marriage, my wife and myself and my God. And I can put aside time with her if it means we understand we're serving Him, but for no other reason can I do that. And I would say this, and I know I'm probably getting a little too far with the button pushing on this, but not all physical time together between a man and a wife is quality physical time together between a man and a wife. You say, oh, we got that. We fulfill that. We check that box. Have you noticed that nothing today has been about box checking? Everything today is about doing things intentionally, with love, and for the betterment of yourself and everybody involved. Physical love tends to fall into a category of non-quality, non-productive. We got a lot of factors that have contributed to that. The internet has not been helpful. But what we have to do is make sure that even that time together is time that we both love and that is good for us and that we labor towards it. And so you want to see quality time? There you go. Quality time and love, love, and love, which is uniquely enjoyed in marriage in such a beautiful way. Last passage, please, Proverbs chapter 18. Last thing as we close. If the Lord follows along with us and supports us through this next week, we will come back in the next Sunday service and in the PM service. Next Sunday night, we will look at the last 2 things. Actually have some stuff next Sunday morning probably on some of the immorality in our country and homosexuality and some other things, a deviation of this so-called love. And we're going to talk about about what's going on with how you would argue that with people, how you would talk about what the body's really for. So we'll get into that in the AM next week. But let me finish with this in Proverbs 18. I think we all know verse 22. I really love verse 22. I was going to finish with it, and then I found a verse that was even better than that. Proverbs 18:22. He who finds a wife finds a good thing and obtains favor from the Lord. I hope that's the way you feel about your spouse, because husbands to wife and wife to husband, that's why God put it together. Now there's a chance, verse 22, there's a chance that you're in a marriage and you're reading that and you're thinking, I don't feel like it's a good thing right now. Has it ever been? Was there a time in the beginning when we were spending good time together when it was? I believe everybody would have to say, yes, you did marry this person. There were no goats exchanged, no blind things going on. You chose this person. It's a good thing. And it's always been intended to be. But the verse I really want to finish with is verse 24. I'm a social guy. I like to hang out with a lot of people. But a man of too many friends comes to ruin. But there is a friend who sticks closer than a brother. Mine is here tonight. Closer than a brother. My one true, closest, shared, together, united, singular friend. It's us against the world, but we don't want it to be. It just will be if that's what it comes to. And we will spend the time together we need to make sure it is always so, if the Lord is willing and if her patience continues. I hope that that's what you, if you're young and engaged and getting married next Friday week, I hope that that's what you're in for, and I hope that you put in the work to get it. And those of you who've been married a few years, be careful. It's those first, you talk about why those first few years are so tough. A lot of it is we start to feel that stretch, life stuff falls in between, and we don't know what to do. I hope that you have some tools you can use. Friends are good, but you can have too many. You need someone who's closer than a friend, closer than a brother, your best friend. If you need encouragement, or if you need to confess some things that can help bring unity and peace, then we're here for you. Certainly if you're not a Christian and you need to unite with God, the closer you get to God, the closer you can get to one another, you know that we're here for you. But above all else, those who are entering into marriage, those who are in marriage, would you spend a little quality time with your significant other this week? Just a little bit. I'm going to give you guys the same assignment. You want the same assignment? It'll be the same next week. I'll say, how'd that go? And you'll go, what if the man in the marriage just set aside sometime, somewhere, and don't start with the third thing, gentlemen, start at the top, and just set it aside and made it so for the sake of one another, and she did the same, and you had at least 2 moments this week that were uniquely for the two of you. I'd love to hear how beneficial that was for you both. If we can help you in any possible way, the Lord is here with us as we stand and sing.